What are UFOs, UAP? Now, you already stated why that my favorite hypothesis is extraterrestrial. Why? The reason is because it has the most evidence, and it's not even close. Let me explain what I mean. Scientists have so far discovered a grand total of 0 extra dimensions, despite trying. We have discovered a grand total of 0 parallel universes, despite the multiverse in the comic books, like DC and stuff. Okay, none. How many exoplanets have we found?
A lot.
Thousands.
More every day. Welcome back. I'm here again with Dr. Szydagis. Dr. Szydagis, welcome back.
It's good to be back.
Okay. The prior episode was absolutely fascinating. People are going to love it. Let's get a little bit closer this time to the UAP topic. And let's talk a little bit about detection. And this is something that you are very well known for. So just, you give folks a background on when you started working on this, why, and then kind of current projects that you're working on that will help you achieve this aim.
Absolutely. The story is that my colleague at University of Albany, Kevin Knuth, he's the one who got me into the whole UAP business, but in particular detection. So Kevin Knuth was approached by Kevin Day and Gary Voorhees. They are tic-tac witnesses. They weren't the pilots, but they were on the ships at the time of the 2004 incident involving the Nimitz and the Princeton and their group. And they started an organization called UAPX with the goal of figuring out what UAP are, doing field expeditions, which is not a new idea. It's happened over the past few decades, but not as often as it should have, probably because of the stigma and the taboo against the topic. So UAPX is one of the first organizations in sort of the new era. What I mean by the new era is sort of like the post New York Times, Leslie Kean, Lou Elizondo era. So UAPX and Galileo Project kind of formed around the same time, and a lot of other groups, because now everyone wants to actually go and build experiments, not experiments in the sense of like testing, and experiments in the sense of observational science, like we do in astronomy, zoology sometimes, where you're not always able to bring everything into the lab. That doesn't mean it's not science. It means it's observational. It means that reproducibility is hard, replicability is hard, and you have to strive for it. But basically, I'm part of a team, UAPX, that Gary Voorhees is president of now, my colleagues Kevin Knuth and Cecilia Levy, another professor here. We're working on sensors, right? Building sensor suites. And we already had an expedition where we went to Laguna Beach and Avalon and Catalina Island. This was in 2021. And this is captured in the documentary film A Tear in the Sky by Carolyn Corey that you can download and watch. Yeah. And we are, but more important than that, we're working on a scientific paper. You can actually find online the first draft of my paper, again, just plugging in my name and UAPX, and you'll find the first peer review draft, first rough draft of our results from the expedition. The results are not as spectacular as, for example, Galileo Project's Pacific expedition, because, it's hard to get lucky, right? Our first result isn't like, wow, we got a photo of aliens waving from the mothership. You probably would have heard of it if we did. But I don't think our results are no less valuable because it was our first rodeo. And so we were testing what works and what doesn't.
When the United States and China clash, the world will never be the same, especially when forces beyond reality threaten to intervene. What if the United States went to war with the People's Republic of China? How would these rivals fight for supremacy on land, sea, air, and across the stochastic streams of time? What wonder weapons would be unleashed? What horrors would emerge from the irradiated sludge of the South China Sea? What heroes would rise and forever change the course of history? Tread into the deepest and darkest dimensions of the multiverse, gaze through a kaleidoscope of fractured realities, and bear witness to the disturbing visions of World War III from today's greatest minds in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Weird World War, China. Available now from Bain Books at bain.com.
Now, so actually, as I just asked you the next question, so based on your testing, what have you found works and what have you found either doesn't work or is just not relevant?
That's an excellent question. And this is why in the scientific paper we're writing, as I said, still under peer review, but the preprint is available online. I'm the first author of that paper. We have an entire section called Lessons Learned. So I can summarize that for you. Basically, we learned that more is not always better. It's better for TV and movies is to have like 50 cameras. That is not the right approach. And the reason is because you don't have enough manpower to analyze all the data during and after the expedition. It's better to go for less data, which sounds weird. You want as much data as possible. It's better to go with a greater diversity in the types of data rather than just have like a million identical cameras. You want cameras that are sensitive to different wavelengths. We ended up with 8 FLIR cameras and 1 visible light camera, or 2. No. That was not a good idea in retrospect. We should have had a better balance of the numbers that go into different buckets of different types of sensors. And we also need to have better time synchronization. Because let's say you have an anomaly in one sensor. Can you check the other one? So I'll give you a great example of it. You know that UFOs are famous for, like electromagnetic effects, right? Again, it's never been proven conclusively because it's hard to do that. But, shutting down cars and stuff like that. Again, no like hard evidence of that, but everybody knows the stories. We've all watched the X-Files, right? And the UFO flies over and First Counter and Close Encounters, right? From 1977. Basically, imagine if you have a camera that shows something strange you can't identify right away, flying saucer shape, classic, or cigar shape or something. And you've got an anomalously high magnetic field in your magnetic field detector. That's the philosophy of UAPX, is look for a coincidence. And I'm not using the term coincidence like we use popular, like, oh, that's a
coincidence.
In science. It's a science term, coincidence, which means for
something
happening at the same time in multiple instruments. It doesn't mean it's accidental. And in fact, in science, the word coincidence is the opposite of what it means in everyday language. In science, the word for coincidence that we use in our everyday language, that's called accidental coincidence. When two things happen at the same time but they're not related, that's called accidental coincidence in math and science. So when I talk about coincidence, I mean the opposite of what everyone else means when they say coincidence, an on-purpose coincidence. So basically, that's the philosophy. And the problem with our first expedition, we didn't synchronize the clocks properly. Not even at a 1 second, not even like everybody pushed a button at the same time. The clocks are off by like a minute or 2. That's a huge mistake that we don't want to repeat. So we learned a lot about what works and what doesn't work from our first expedition.
To advertise on Through a Glass Darkly, email throughaglassdarkly@gmail.com. And when you kind of went in those expeditions, what sort of equipment have you found is the most important? Like, so let's say somebody who doesn't quite have a budget, but let's say they want to do some of this stuff on their own in their backyard, right?
Yeah.
What sorts of equipment would be useful or helpful to have?
An excellent question. And unfortunately, it's still not going to be cheap. But I think the easiest way to start is to have at least 1 camera. Obviously, 2 is far, far better because then you can triangulate, or you can have one that's a fisheye to see the whole sky and a second one that slews to see where the first one detected something. So you need 1 or 2 cameras and a computer that's always taking video and is looking for anything in the sky. And obviously, you're going to catch lots of things, birds and planes and things like that. So then you need a way of reviewing what's been captured. And it's not easy to do this with a citizen science approach because you need to build like control data sets, libraries. What does a bird look like? What does a plane look like in camera? So it's not easy, but I think that we can build toward the future like that over the coming years and decades, where scientists and engineers can engage more with citizen scientists. The key is, however, I think, to having a controlled experiment is to do like what I just said, is you have, like a camera that's like, weatherproofed and running 24/7 in your backyard and logging data. That's better than like, oh man, look, I saw this UFO this one day, and you don't even remember the day and the time. You don't have the metadata. That's not that helpful, unfortunately. You could have the greatest UFO video ever, but if you don't have it in multiple cameras or multiple sensors, and you don't have like all the metadata, well, what time was it? What were the weather conditions that day? Things like that. Then it's really hard. And so it's really hard to teach everybody out there about the scientific method and how to apply it on their own. I'm not saying it's impossible. We've got examples of citizen science in paleontology, in astronomy, and other fields, but it's not easy because, let's be honest, the science is not taught correctly, especially at the elementary and middle school and high school levels in this country. Other countries might do it better. I think Europe might do it better, Asia. I don't think we do a good job here. Science, the way it's currently taught, is stuff your head full of facts instead of teaching science as curiosity, as testing, I think that, and then we memorize the 5 steps of the scientific method, and then we don't even, not every textbook obviously has the same labels, they can't even agree. To me, you can summarize the scientific method in 1 or 2 sentences, and it's simply you test your hypotheses against the real world. If your tests fail, come up with a better explanation. To me, that's what differentiates science from belief. You don't need to write out the 5 or 6 steps of the scientific method and memorize that in 7th grade or something. I think it's as simple as test your ideas against the real world. And that's one of the reasons why I'm in this whole UAP detection business, because I think we have mountains. At this point, we have mountains of sensor evidence, not just human eyewitnesses, that suggests something's happening. Not necessarily aliens, not necessarily craft, but something interesting's happening that we better understand.
It could be some unknown atmospheric effect for all we know.
That's right. For all we know, it could be some atmospheric effect that looks like craft traveling, faster than the speed of sound. I don't think that's the case, but it could be.
Neither do I, but
it could be. Yeah, no, we talked about in the last episode, my favorite hypothesis is non-human intelligence, and in particular extraterrestrials, but it's only a hypothesis. We haven't proven it, but part of the reason we haven't proven it, I think, is because the government's classified the good shit. That's what I think, but I can't prove it.
Okay, so you talked a little bit about Terror in the Sky. Are you familiar with that? I think Google Earth has since altered it, but it's, I think, also on the NOAA website. There's a slit. It looks like a unnatural structure off the coast of Malibu.
Yes.
What do you make of that? And in terms of like detecting UAPs and just whatever you know or what you make of that based on your experience?
I believe the formation you're talking about was even mentioned in a Netflix episode of The Unexplained with William Shatner. So I know exactly what you're talking about. I have a very powerful mind's eye. I can even like close my eyes. I know exactly the ocean formation you're talking about. I mean, this is one of the reasons why UAPX chose the location we did for our first expedition at Terror in the Sky. It wasn't just that everyone always makes fun of us for choosing the location because of the Nimitz encounter. They're like, oh, that was 20 years ago. What are the odds they're hanging out 20 years? Yeah, but
there could be a base there, right?
Yeah, what if there's a base? I mean, like, come on. The place is, no, actually, to counter people who've said that to me, I found articles about UFOs and the Catalina Island area, that whole area, Malibu, San Diego, Los Angeles, that whole like area of a few hundred miles. I found articles predating Leslie Kean's article that talk about UFOs in Catalina. So that's an excellent question. What do I make of this formation? It is intriguing, and it helps justify and motivate why that's an area to consider still. And I think it ties into the whole UFO USO connection thing. You know, there's a great book. There are several books. There's one by Preston Dennett, one by Ivan Sanderson about USOs. Particularly Preston Dennett has one about the Catalina area. Now, on the flip side, though, again, as a scientist, I have to have a skepticism, not an unhealthy skepticism. That's like Mick West and those people. I have to have a healthy skepticism. How common are such formations? So as a scientist, in order for me to know whether that's unusual, I need to see a map of the entire ocean, or however much. I know we're nowhere near a map of the entire ocean. However much we've mapped so far of the ocean, I want to know how common that shape is. I think that's a fair question. And if the answer is it's not that common, great. That motivates even more interest in the shape. So I don't think you can just look at a shape on its own in a vacuum and be like, wow, that looks like, because then you could fall into what's called, pareidolia, where you see patterns where there aren't any, and humans have evolved to do that because it's evolutionary. It helped us survive, when we were first evolving. So I think we have to be careful, pareidolia. So I'm optimistic that this could be something interesting, but we need to compare it to other parts of the ocean, other nearby parts of the Pacific. How common are these type of shapes? Could it just be an accident? Could it be a accidental coincidence? Could just be random? I don't know the answer to that. And until we get more data on mapping the ocean floor, right? The ocean is famously not fully mapped. I think we need to map the ocean floor over the coming 5-10 years or more. There are initiatives to do this. I think it's important to reserve judgment, but I do think it justifies more interest in the area.
Okay, now I'm going to share something with you. I wasn't going to do that. I was going to do this after the show, but now that you mentioned Catalina, I just want to show you a picture I took. I have no idea what this is. It could be, I'm open to it being a lens flare or whatever. I posted it on Twitter. I asked, and I not CC'd, but I tagged Mick West and just said, like, hey, could you, is there some lens artifact that would cause this? Where, I have no idea what this is. So I'm saying this with full openness and ignorance, right? I have no idea what this is.
Did he respond to you?
Of course he didn't. Okay, so this is Catalina Island. I think this is the middle of Catalina Island. Can you see it?
Yeah.
And this is on, I think, June 11th. I think that's when it's tagged of this year. This is looking toward, I think this is Los Angeles in the background. And I just took this picture, around dusk. And I noticed this after looking at the pictures long after I returned. Okay. It just looks like a bell in the sky. Now, again, it could be, is it some lens effect from these light sources down here? I don't know. I have no idea.
Sure I know exactly what it is because I've created photos just like this.
Okay, perfect. Because I don't think, I have no reason to think it's a UFO, right?
I've messed with people because I've created photos just like this. That's a reflection of the two light sources at the bottom right. Those two, the two boats, that one and the one to the right of it. It's those two, and they're being reflected off of your camera lens and being projected into the sky. I have seen. Let me guess. Is this an iPhone 13, 14?
Yeah, iPhone 14.
I've replicated this on my campus. For campus emergencies, the blue light for the campus police. Mm-hmm. I've replicated this same phenomenon with the campus blue light, where I created an orb in the sky. I'm sorry to disappoint. Now, to be clear, there are plenty of UFOs
I'm not going to argue with you because that was my first. I'm like, what the heck is this?
No, but don't get me wrong. There are plenty of real UFO photos out there and videos. There are plenty of real ones. But this one, I think, is a reflection of the two lights on the boats in the lower right.
I think you're right. And that was kind of what my thing is. I'm just surprised Mick West didn't even bother to.
And it's so easy because you got the fancy, you've got multiple lenses on your phone, right? It's the iPhone 14. So what's happening is you can have one lens reflect. Yeah, exactly. You'll have a reflection and one lens bounce into the other. I have seen this happen. I can produce it any evening at dusk. That's the easiest time to do it. In the evening, I can go out and I can get photos just like that.
Yeah, and by the way, my reaction is the correct reaction to have with this, right? Because I'm looking for truth, right? And if that's the truth, and if, again, I suspected it was that, but I didn't know. And I think that's the right attitude to have, and not no, you can't be right. That's a UFO. Well, that's really helpful. So when people see things like that just kind of appear out of nowhere and they're using kind of this type of device, You don't go crazy with it, right? You don't go out and say whatever. Anyway.
Now, the flip side of this is if you're taking a picture, the genuine UFO with an iPhone, there's a good reason it might be blurry. That's not a professional camera. Everyone likes to think, and Neil deGrasse Tyson always laughs at like, oh, if UFOs are real, everyone's got an iPhone. Are you kidding me? There's lens artifacts. There's all kinds of issues. If there's a genuine, like, weird-ass thing in the sky, you're going to take a shitty photo of it because it's hard to get it focused and get it out there in time. I've been practicing taking photos of airplanes. Most of the time, they come out like crap. And especially, and everyone thinks iPhone is so advanced. It is, but it's not a replacement for a real, like, camera, like a professional, like Canon or Nikon or something. Like, iPhone is great, but it's not a replacement for a real camera, a professional.
And even when you're using a real camera, it's hard you can't just snap the sky and just kind of get it.
If you're scared if something unusual is happening and you're caught off guard, you're not going to have the presence of mind necessary to focus it correctly. So I think it makes sense to me that a lot of UFO pictures are blurry. I think that there's very good explanations for it.
Okay. All right. So going back to UAP detection.
Yeah.
Like how many other, well, you mentioned, let me step back. So in past history, there seemed to have been, and I haven't plotted this, done a regression analysis on, mapping all the incidents, but there appears to be a high correlation between UFO sightings and proximity to radiological sources, right? So either nuclear missiles, nuclear power plants. I think Secretary of Energy Granholm, said, well, yeah, we see these things, but they're UAPs. And, she tried to kind of play it off as, we just don't know what they are, et cetera. But there seems to be a very high correlation between the two. When you're trying to detect UAPs, is there also things that you can do that are equivalent to throwing chum in the water, i.e. like having some sort of a radiological source with you?
That's an excellent question. This is too speculative for most academics, right, because of the stigma. But to me, this is a testable hypothesis. But it sounds like you don't know, or maybe I got to mention, there's been an extensive study done by the SCU, Scientific Coalition of UAP Studies.
Yeah, I'm not aware of it, so please say more. Yeah.
Yeah, so several people there. I'm also a member of SCU, not just a UAPX, a member of so all these organizations. And SCU has done a study on this. I believe the leader of the study was Larry Hancock, and I believe they published at least the first part of it on the SCU website. And the idea here is they've concluded tentatively. Again, people will attack them, of course, but it seems like they have come to the conclusion that there does seem to be some sort of correlation. And it seems to still be there, even when you account for things like population density and you account for things like military sites that are nuclear versus non-nuclear, because, any military site, you're going to be watching the skies more. You've got to account for those variables. And they've claimed to have accounted for many of these variables, not all of them, but yes, there does seem to be some sort of connection. Some people, again, still argue against this and say, no, it's random, there's no connection. But I'm starting to become convinced. And I think this is very, very interesting. So SCU claims that it's an intentional survey of nuclear materials. Now, it's funny you ask this, because this is one of the reasons why I was inspired to develop a new type of nuclear reactor. Because for exactly the point you were just saying, I was thinking to myself, could I come up with some kind of small modular nuclear reactor I could build myself and something that would not use the traditional radioactive elements, kind of skirt the laws about building your own reactor, and I came up with something that might work. And so I was inspired. And that's just another example of what we talked about at the end of the last episode, where it doesn't matter if all UFOs are aliens or they're not. But if they inspire engineers and scientists like me to go develop great new ideas, then it's the entire endeavor is worthwhile. So that's our big thing. Is now, to be clear, I'm not going out there I don't want, some government official watching this video. We are years away, probably decades, from me realizing my crazy new idea of a small scale reactor. That is not something UAPX is going out and doing tomorrow, but that's the best answer I have for your throwing up the chum in the water.
Let's talk about this reactor idea that you have. when Dr. Knuth told me about it, I think in a prior interview, I don't even know if it was in the interview. It may have been after the interview, but I'm fascinated by it. So, at a high level, to the extent that you can without getting yourself the attention from some some government agency. What's the concept? What's different about it? And why is it allowed?
The concept is very different. It's not like, so whenever I bring it up, I always have people saying, oh, small modular reactor, that already exists. And then I'm given 50 articles and I'm like, yes, I know. I did my homework. I wasn't born yesterday. It's not that type of small modular reactor. It's not. It has nothing to do with uranium or plutonium. It's a new type of system. It's not even nuclear. We shouldn't even use that word. It's basically a reactor that doesn't use any radioactive elements. It uses elements that are stable. They are safe. They're only made temporarily radioactive with an input of the right particles, of the right type of beam, and at the right energy. So it's similar in that sense to fusion. It doesn't just power itself. You got to turn it on. And so you can't think of my idea as a power plant by itself. It's a power multiplier. You need to pay to play. And that's probably one of the reasons why it's never been thought of before. So basically, I can't get into all the details because the patent is still pending, but I do have several.
It's kind of like an energy amplifier. Would that be a way to describe it?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Just like fusion. Everyone thinks of fusion as this magic energy source. It's not. Like if you go to the latest data on fusion from Lawrence Livermore, they got to start it with lasers, and then they get 150% out. I'm also looking for 150% energy out compared to in. So you got to pay to play. And so in that sense, though, that's not a fatal drawback. It's no more of a drawback than nuclear fusion is. And so, but my idea, to be clear, is not fusion; it's fission. But it's not fission of uranium or plutonium or thorium or any of those heavy elements. I'm looking at light elements like lithium. So basically take lithium from batteries when they're dead and recycle those lithium compounds, lithium salts, into this new technology and extract energy from their nuclei instead of from the electrons like you do in a batteries. So it kind of kills two birds with one stone. It kind of takes care of, climate change, low carbon footprint, technology. And at the same time, it gives you a natural way of dealing with the giant pileup we're going to have like in the garbage, like in landfills of dead lithium batteries. If we all switch to electric cars, we think we're saving the planet. It's only part of the solution. What are we going to do with all these flammable batteries, right? It's just, but I have potentially solved that. And I do have some articles out about this, one in the New York Post, one in the Albany Times-Union about this. And because I'm not at Harvard, nothing in the New York Times. So like major outlets, they couldn't care less. They don't want to hear it. Nobody's interested. And so I don't need to worry about government doesn't care because I'm not at Harvard or a big name university. And so very few people have noticed, which is a problem. Actually, because I'm trying to get funding for it, and it has nothing.
Have you tried to get venture capital?
Oh yeah, yep. They seem to be interested, and then they evaporate after a few weeks. Like it's really, really aggravating that like for 0.1% of certain budgets, like defense budgets, things like that, I could have enough money to go pursue this, see if this works at scale. Like a tiny amount of money could put me over the top and get me going. Like it's really frustrating.
I'm going to give you some advice. Give it 18 months. You know what's going to happen in 18 months, right?
It's been 18 months since I first saw it.
Wait another.
Or do you mean 18 months?
18 months from now. Yeah. Give it 18 months. Because what's going to happen in about 18 months is our policymakers aren't very bright. And by that I mean, so I live in California where the energy policy is completely incompetent. So we've been, removing power sources like nuclear power plants, dams, which are, very clean, but there's like a salmon issue, et cetera. While at the same time mandating that I think in 2030 we're not going to be you're not going to be allowed to buy a internal combustion engine vehicle in California anymore. Which, look, the intent's a noble intent, but the problem is when you put a massive increase of electric vehicles onto the grid, and you're not adding supply, you're going to have a crisis. And then you have cryptocurrency, which is also draining a tremendous amount of energy. And then finally, what nobody's really tracking with AI, like these GPUs that NVIDIA is using and producing, stuff like that, are a huge drain on electricity. So if we think the power problem, at least out west, particularly in California, is bad now, we are going to be in crisis in about 18 months. So I think just keep developing that idea. And I think that politicians, policymakers are going to quickly be in a panic. And they're going to be looking for whatever they can to add.
They're not going to be looking here, though. They're going to be looking at Ivy League schools. They're not going to be looking at me. I'm at my school is an up and coming, good institution, but it's not Ivy League. No one's heard of University of Albany. So I'm trying. And the New York Post article didn't actually help because it was over they're basically a tabloid. I shouldn't say that. New York Post people hate
Newsflash, they're all basically tabloids. Like, honestly, in the last, well, I don't want to go, I've gone on this rant a million times on my show, but if you've been in any field, you will have a brush with the media, and they will report something where you've been in the room, literally have been in the room, and you will not recognize what they report. And it will end up shaping a narrative. And you'll ask yourself it's not that they're lying, it's just that they're incompetent. If they're that incompetent about that, are they incompetent about everything else? And guess what? The answer is yes.
Yep.
Yes, they are.
Well, so it's funny you should say that, because in my Times Union article, God, that probably did a lot of damage. I'm talking about a different one now, not just New York Post one. That one, they put safe nuclear power in scare quotes. They put the word safe in quotes. And I'm like, you bastards. I legitimately meant safe. And I realized that it didn't compute, that they didn't understand. I was talking about a form of energy where you can't have a Chernobyl. You can't have a Fukushima. It's literally impossible. Like, with my idea, a terrorist could fly an airplane into it and it still wouldn't melt down. Like, this is inherently safe. And they still didn't get it. Like, this is legitimately safe. And I really think you brought up something very important. If we're serious about climate change, nuclear belongs back on the table. And the
100%.
environmental
zero emissions. Emissions.
Exactly. Yeah. Greenpeace has done a massive amount of damage with being anti-nuclear, because, Chernobyl and Fukushima, they're bad examples. Chernobyl was not due to nuclear power being bad. It was due to Soviet incompetence. And you can read the books about this and watch them. It has nothing to do with nuclear power being intrinsically bad. They built a shitty power plant that was going to melt down one day eventually. And Fukushima, they had an outdated design in an earthquake zone and a tsunamis. Of course it was going to fail. Like, these are obvious failures. Like, come on. But my idea is even better, because that it wouldn't even affect that, because I like I said, I don't even use uranium. You can't even call it nuclear even almost anymore with what I'm doing. So it's kind of way back.
What's your sense of why they don't come back? Like, is there somebody out there that's whispering in their ear? Is it that they're just not doing their due diligence? Like, what are some of the common arguments? I mean, if I were a rational venture capitalist, and that's kind of an oxymoron, but let's assume I am, the only reason I would think that maybe they don't invest in your particular solution might be that it's just too far. It's just too far away. That would be the one thing that would cause. Well, is there anything else that?
No, but the irony is that it's not, because what's great about my idea is it's not new. I'm using physics and engineering principles that already exist. There's like literally nothing unproven of what I want to do. Basically, if it didn't work, that would be more miraculous. If it didn't work, because it has to work. Because I'm not using any crazy new, nuclear fusion, laser. There's no new ideas. It's all rock solid. And The problem is getting a non-scientist to understand that, like, no, you don't understand. This is not like the 20 other people and all the crackpots who come up to you with their magic perpetual motion 0-point energy solution. Like, this is ready to go now, today. Like, if I had $1 or $2 million, I would have a prototype in a year. Like, this is not like 20 years away. This is at worst 5 years. Like, this is not some pie in the sky thing. And it's hard to get people to believe that. And I think the reason why it's so hard is the energy industry has had a lot of false promises, especially by non-scientists or, like, lives in the mom's basement engineer who thinks they've solved the energy crisis. And that's turned off a lot of bankers and venture capitalists because they're like, oh, it's probably bullshit. Especially when I don't have a big name behind it. I don't have comma Harvard after my name. And so nobody wants to take a risk, even though, like I said, like, it's has to work. They want to see a prototype. How am I supposed to build that for $0? Right? So it's a chicken and egg problem. No one wants to give me the seed funding. Nobody wants to take a risk. I already said it's 100% guaranteed to work, but let's say it's not. Let's say I'm wrong. Isn't it worth, like, losing a few $1 million to me out of the billions of dollars out there for energy just to check if it works? Like, this is what I would call a low risk, high return investment, the best kind. Low risk, high return. Minimal risk because, like I said, it's for all practical purposes, 100% it should work. The return on investment is like, oh my God, climate change, lithium battery recycling. My hope is after I have a scientific paper published, not some news article, but a real paper published through peer review, that will be the game changer. But the problem is, how do I have time to write that when I'm also working on dark matter and UFOs? I'm doing everything at once, but I want to write a paper and get that published. But then that'll be hard because then I will face the dogmatism, the same kind of dogmatism against UFOs. Oh, this is impossible. Your idea can't work. If it works, why didn't we think of it 50 years ago? I'm going to have assholes say that to me, guaranteed, when I try to publish this. No matter how good my data is at showing that it's working, I'm going to have people saying, if it really works, why didn't we do it already? I've already been asked that about 10 or 15 times. That, oh, it's so great, why don't we do it already? I don't know. How am I supposed to know why humanity's been too stupid to figure this out for 50 years and I did? It's not a great idea. It's a simple. The great thing about my reactor idea is not its complexity. It's its inherent simplicity.
Now, have you don't have to answer this because a lot of this stuff there's non-disclosure agreements and things like that, and I understand that.
Yeah, I can't tell you the details because
but in terms of people that you talk to, you probably can't talk about that unless the answer is no. Have you talked to Peter Thiel about this?
How do I get his attention?
I might be able to help with that, but we can talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah, I mean, that's impossible, honestly, because, again, I'm not at Harvard or an Ivy League. Nobody cares about me. Nobody's heard of my name. Nobody's heard of my school. And so I haven't tried him, but we've tried Bill Gates, Elon Musk. Do you think they even look at an email from my university? No. So, of course, Peter Thiel's not going to give a shit about my new idea. If I was at Harvard, you bet your ass he'd be like, hi, Professor Szydagis, this is Peter Thiel. Like, the problem I'm facing is that there's a bias against new ideas coming from places other than Harvard, Yale, Princeton, etc. Like, the problem is that people don't realize there are good physicists at all universities. Why is my idea given less credence? Because you haven't heard of my university. I think that's a bias against me and against Kevin, Cecilia, my colleagues here.
Look, I'll tell you what it is. So there's something called the iron law of bureaucracy, right? And this is like, I don't know if you are familiar with Jerry Pournelle. He's like a science fiction author.
I am very familiar.
So he came up with this concept, which is organizations initially are created for the purpose of that organization. So like an army is created to defend a country, okay? But over time, as those institutions evolve, a bureaucracy is created, and eventually the sole point of that organization becomes to perpetuate the bureaucracy, and it forgets its initial mission. What's happened with venture capital is always supposed to be that place where you could take wild ideas that are written on a napkin and change the world. But because the industry has become so built up over the years, they no longer take those risks. So in order to mitigate risk, they only, they have these filters, right?
Yep.
And one of the filters is Harvard, Stanford, MIT,
exactly.
etc.
Bingo.
Right? Which, in many cases, might will yield or will siphon out some better ideas, but they're going to miss the ideas. And the one thing that they get by investing outside of that is that nobody else is looking there.
Mm-hmm.
No one else is, or very few are looking there. So, and then there's also partnership dynamics, which are also just poisonous, right? Like if you take a few risks and they don't work out, you're gone, right? You're gone. So anyway, that's kind of, I don't know if that helps to explain the dynamic, but
no, you're 100% right. Yeah.
And then, okay, so a little bit about this. Yeah.
I think we kind of went off on my reactor idea. We went off from UAP detection.
But I did want to talk about the reactor. So that's, which is fine. So going back to UAP detection, right? And by the way, that might not be helping either, right? They might be like, oh, he's a UFO guy, this and that, right?
Oh, yeah, of course that doesn't help. That absolutely hurts instead of helping. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And it doesn't help that Elon Musk, who knows better, denies the existence of these things. He definitely knows better.
Oh, I have in the Medium essay I wrote, and that is now on the UAPX website, about the common criticism against studying UAP. He tweets the like, oh, why is it always blurry pictures? He's made fun of this so many times.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So UAP detection. What's kind of next in store for this project?
Well, kind of on the tail end of what we were just talking about, money. UAPX has no money, and so nothing is going to come out of it more except for, well, we'll continue to write scientific publications about what we learned from our first expedition. But if we're going to have more expeditions, we need someone to open up a wallet and give us money. And part of the reason why that's not happening, it's not just the stigma. It's not that, because there are plenty of private investors totally interested in UFOs. Problem is, there are too many UFO groups now. We went from too few to too many almost overnight. And now there are so many groups that if I'm a rich billionaire, I don't know who to give money to. Do I give money to AVI? Do I give money to Galileo Project? Do I give money to UAPX? Do I give money to SCU? Do I give money to Society for UAP Studies? Do I give money to SkyHub or Sky 360? Like the list goes on and on and on. So the problem is, we've got an alphabet soup of acronyms of all these, and MUFON, and we have too many organizations. We're going to need to have some consolidation. I'm not saying consolidation of one organization. No. That's very dangerous, because then that's infiltrated by whatever from the government and taken down from the inside. Like, you can't have one organization. Right. You need 2 or 3. Do you need 50? No, you don't. Because what's happening right now is the tiny amount of money that is there, not from the government, but from millionaires and billionaires interested in UFOs. They exist. There's plenty of them. They've subdivided the money among all these competing organizations. That's the problem right now. So right now, the solution to move forward is we need to start doing some consolidation. And UAPX is already trying to do this. We've been trying for years, but it's hard. Everyone wants to be in charge of their own organization. I swear to God, every few months, there's an article. And I won't pick on one in particular because I'll get in trouble with people I know. So I'm not going to pick on one. But like every few months, I swear to God, there's like a press release, the whatever organization or foundation or company to solve the UFO problem. And I'm like, really? We need another one? Isn't there like 100 organizations like this already? And yes, I know UAPX is already redundant when it was created. I know that. But so I'm not being hypocritical here, because I do admit that. But remember, I didn't found UAPX. I just joined it. And when I joined, remember, I was new to the whole UFO thing. I had no idea there was 50 organizations already. There was some naivete there. naivete there. So basically, I'm not claiming that UAPX was any better, forming its own, thing when there are already organizations that exist. But now we need to go back. We need to start consolidating. And so in UAPX, Gary Varese, our president, is already reaching out to different organizations saying, can we start merging? Can we start collecting ourselves into a smaller number of organizations? That's what has to happen, and that's where the future lies right now. I know that's not what your question was. Probably you wanted me to talk about future expeditions and our new sensors we're going to have, but I could tell you those things, but none of that's real unless the dollars come in first to make those.
Okay, and then what do you think? And this is highly speculative, right? And I'm saying that so you don't get into trouble by answering it. Like what I'm about to ask you is highly speculative. So two things.
Okay.
Where do you think we're going to be 10 to 15 years from now in regard to this problem? And I mean like wide ranging. Like, are we going to make contact? Are we going to learn more? Is the government going to disclose what's going on? And then the second question is, and you've already answered this for the most part, but in terms of potential explanations for this phenomena, I know you think the ET hypothesis is probably the most likely, but what are some of the other hypotheses do you think also have a high probability? So first part, where are we going to be in 10 to 15 years on this problem?
Unfortunately, I have a little bit of a pessimistic view right now on where we'll be in 10 or 15 years. I think that because of the problem I just outlined with too many organizations and not enough money, I think what's going to happen is the lack of progress caused by having too many organizations with not enough money for each, is that's going to be used by skeptics and debunkers. You see, we were right. Look at all these organizations and nobody has found the smoking gun. Nobody's found evidence of aliens. And that's going to be used to start to shut things down again. That's the pessimistic view. Now, the optimistic side of me thinks that we're going to make some progress. The Galileo project will make progress. Hopefully, I'll make some progress with Kevin and Cecilia and Gary as part of UAPX. I hope we'll make some progress in terms of like finding some anomalies that are not so easy to dismiss. In terms of disclosure, so that's on the instrumentation front of civilian scientists doing their own thing, in academia. Basically, I'm not saying citizen scientists, civilian scientists, like actual Ph.D, like me, like progressing and like Avi Loeb. In terms of if, let's say, again, there's no proof of this, although I find Grush, let's take the assumption that Grush was 100% accurate, okay? Let's just take that assumption. Then I think if non-human intelligence is a real thing, I think we're going to see a step-by-step disclosure, assuming the U.S. government knows more than it's letting on, which we kind of all think is probably the case. I think we're going to see like a step-by-step. Basically, first, we will discover evidence of life on a distant planet. Then discover, as in we already knew it was probably there. Or maybe legitimately discovered.
I think we have evidence of prior habitation on Mars, like all sorts of stuff.
I'm getting there. I'm saying distant. Mars is not as distant as what I'm talking about. Mars is distant for you, not
right. It'll be Webb telescope. Well, look, we found an exoplanet that. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm talking far away. That's step 0, not even step 1. Then I think step 1 is we will discover, because we probably already have, we will discover microbial life within our solar system. So like close by. It might be Mars. It might be dead. It might be fossilized.
Even though we did in the Clinton administration. But I
think step 1A will be dead microbes, fossilized, and then step 1B will be living microbes right now.
Right.
Then step 2 is we will discover an intelligent, obvious evidence, maybe with James Webb, obvious evidence of a civilization far, far away.
Or artifacts first.
Yeah. So the step 2A, step 2B.
Yeah.
And then step 3 will be, by the way, they were here all along. We were just screwing with you when we said UFOs were fake. That'll be step 3, I think. And I think between each step, the governments will check. Did society collapse? Did religion collapse yet? Like, it'll be at every step, they'll test the waters. I didn't come up with this, by the way. This idea was first given to me by Kevin Knuth, my friend Kevin, whom we've interviewed already. I do not like I never take credit for ideas that are not my own. I fleshed out this idea with more sub-steps, but I believe Kevin gave me the original idea for this. But I think something like that might happen, might already be happening. But a couple monkey wrenches might get thrown in it. Catastrophic disclosure. They talked about this at the Soul Foundation conference last year. Bam! A flying saucer crashes in the middle of Times Square. Everyone gets it on their iPhone. It's on YouTube. Uh-oh, it's too late. Disclosure just happened. You're screwed. That's another. And then another possibility is, if we really are talking about non-human intelligence, what stops them from tomorrow going, hey, everybody, we're real? Like, nothing stops them from doing that. They're calling all the shots. So I'm hoping to live long enough. If non-human intelligence is a real thing, I hope to live long enough to see either disclosure, or we, as in, scientific community, will figure it out on our own without needing classified data. But there was a second half to your question.
What do you think this non-human intelligence is?
Yeah, what is it? What are UFOs, UAP? Now, you already stated why that my favorite hypothesis is the extraterrestrial one. Why? The reason is because it has the most evidence, and it's not even close. Let me explain what I mean. Scientists have so far discovered a grand total of 0 extra dimensions, despite trying. We have discovered a grand total of 0 parallel universes, despite the multiverse in the comic books, like DC and stuff. Okay, none. How many exoplanets have we found?
A lot.
Thousands.
And more every day. Right.
Exactly. So I'm not dismissing alternative, like, maybe they're from here, Silurian, cryptoterrestrial, ultra-terrestrial. I'm not dismissing the other hypotheses. Let's be clear. I'm not poo-pooing them like a skeptic would. I'm just saying they've got nothing going for them. Well, some of them have a little bit more than nothing. I think crypto and ultra-terrestrial have more than nothing. But things like breakaway civilization, time travelers, they have a little bit more than nothing. But extra dimensions, parallel universes have literally nothing going for them. Whereas extraterrestrial hypothesis has like mountains. We think that in our galaxy alone, there are probably billions of potentially habitable planets. Maybe trillions, if you count moons and asteroids and stuff like that. There could be trillions of habitable worlds in the Milky Way alone. And how many of them are habitable, right? Are actually habitable, even if it's a tiny fraction. That's still a huge number. And if you think of, we're discovering more planets every day. And the 10,000 we know about right now, that's a tiny part of the sky. Like I said, if you extrapolate to the whole sky, there's probably billions and trillions, not counting moons, not counting non-planets. It's crazy to think we're alone. Crazy. In my opinion, the claim we are alone, in my opinion, that is an extraordinary claim. And so I'm turning Carl Sagan's thing on.
It requires extraordinary evidence.
Where's the extraordinary evidence we're alone?
Right.
All the evidence points now the other way. We're probably not alone. And now I know all the skeptics will jump in. Yeah, sure, they're over there. Interstellar travel is too hard. We already covered that in the last episode, though. Interstellar travel is not that hard. It's a lack of imagination on our parts on how to do it. It's not necessarily impossible. And so I think extraterrestrial is my favorite, but I'm not, and I know Grush said they're like interdimensional, I don't even know like what would that actually mean. I'm not poo-pooing the other ideas. I'm just saying they don't have the same like literal mountains of evidence. I mean, go out tonight, maybe, well, you live in California, so the city lights probably prevent you from seeing any stars. But if it's not cloudy, go out tonight and count 5 stars. I want you to guess how many of those 5 stars probably has a habitable planet around it with oxygen and water. Take a guess.
80%?
Well, It's only 20%, but still that's huge. Most people think it's like,
Right.
oh, it's 0 in 5 because it's like 0 in a million. It's 1 in a million. One of those 5 stars, odds are very good that there's a planet in the potentially habitable zone. And then look at the rest of the sky and be like, oh shit. And then remember, you're only seeing like on a perfect night, so you're not going to see this near any city lights. But in a dark sky, there are very few dark skies like this on Earth now. You could see with the naked eye, a few thousand stars, maximum, in a perfectly dark sky, like far away from all the cities. But the galaxy has 100 or 200, somewhere around there, like maybe a little bit more, 200, 300 billion stars. Most of them have planets. And about 20% of those planets might be habitable.
Yeah, so you're talking 60 billion habitable planets.
Potentially. And that's not counting moons, and that's not counting life as we don't know it, right? The opposite of Spock's quote. That's only counting like, oh, it needs oxygen and water. What about life that doesn't need any of those things? What about life that can thrive under extreme high temperatures and cold? I'm not counting those. I'm only counting life as we know it. So that number might actually be higher, not smaller than what you just said. So of course, we're probably not alone. And so that's, again, why I love extra dimensions. By the way, I'm a sci-fi fan and everything, but sadly, no evidence for them at all, despite trying for decades to find evidence. So I think that I'm very much in favor of the extraterrestrial hypothesis, even though it's far from proven. I just said there's mountains of evidence. Evidence is not proof. Nobody has proof. Avi Loeb does not have proof that a Muamua was an alien spaceship. We don't have proof that any UFO flying saucer was definitively an alien spacecraft. We don't have that. And in fact, we probably shouldn't even be using word like proof, because science is not like math. You prove 2 + 2 = 4. You don't prove things in science. What you do is you find a large enough body of evidence that you agree that that's the best explanation. You can very rarely, even in science, you don't get to proof. It's kind of even not the right word to use.
All right, Dr. Szydagis, appreciate you and thank you for your time. And I'm sure folks will be enraptured by this episode. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
If you enjoyed today's video, please hit like and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you can be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you. Now, if you're enjoying the channel and you want to support it, there are several things you can do. In fact, there are 5 things you can do. The first thing you can do is just buy my books. I got plenty of books out in the market right now, and I would prefer that folks buy a book rather than giving me direct support, because they get something out of it. They get a real tangible product. The second way you can support me is by becoming a member on YouTube or becoming a patron on Patreon. And just go to either site and it'll explain everything. The third way you can support the channel is by checking out my merch site, which is here. There's plenty of stuff that you can get to support the channel. And I'd appreciate that you have it and you can wear it. Not only do you help support the channel, but you also help promote the channel, and I appreciate that. The fourth way that you can support the channel, and this is really easy, is anytime you want to buy something on Amazon, literally just go to the description below and click on any link, literally any link. The channel gets a cut of that, and it costs you no extra money. You just go through the link, as I'm part of the Amazon Affiliates Club. The fifth and final way you can support the channel is through donations. Now, I don't prefer these because it's more of an expression of gratitude, but you don't really get anything out of it as a subscriber to the channel. However, if you decide to do these options, there's 2 options. There's Buy Me a Coffee, which is a separate site, and there's also, you can go through YouTube with either a super chat, super sticker, or a super thanks. Again, I prefer Buy Me a Coffee because that organization takes less money than Amazon does, But either way, I appreciate any support you are willing to give the channel. So thank you very much, and keep watching. I really appreciate it.